What's up? I'm Kyle, and this is the Vervet Forest. This episode is all about a special little monkey named Eliza. Eliza was brought to us a couple of months ago. She was being kept by a family living with mostly men who own the local paint shop in the town of Zanin, which is nearby to the Vervet Monkey Foundation. They thought that Eliza was actually a male, but she doesn't have a penis, so turns out she's a female. Go figure. They said that she was just getting too wild and too crazy. Sounded like she was acting like too much of a monkey. And so they brought her to us figuring that she wasn't going to make a good pet and she'd be better off with her own kind. Eliza was around 6 months old when she arrived to our care, and as with most of the youngsters, she was quarantined into the baby cabin for her first few days here at the Vervet Monkey Foundation.
It's the best, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so great. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Eliza was energetic, rambunctious, and playful, and it was easy to see how she quickly became too much of a handful for this family. The behavior that you're seeing Eliza exhibit is not natural to a wild monkey. This is the behavior of a monkey who is very humanized and has spent a lot of time playing with people. When the bandits came to look at her through the window, Eliza wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. She wasn't interested in the other monkeys at all. A few days later, Eliza was moved to Disneyland and Tori gave her a bath, which at first wasn't very successful.
You ready?
Someone nervous.
What's going on? She's too big. Don't stand up.
Because of Eliza's humanization and her trust of myself and of Tori, she finally, cautiously relaxed into the warm tub of water.
That's better. Like a little jacuzzi.
I think she's realizing it's not so bad after all.
Oh, you like that? Now you gotta get in this bucket. Okay, you're slightly bigger than I thought you were. Oh.
When she was done with the bath, she made it very clear. She moved straight over to the one patch of sunlight in the enclosure and started rubbing her chest all over the dirty ground and foraging through the dry leaves.
I think she's just, yes, very much yes. She's digging to China now.
Look at how fluffy and adorable Eliza got after her bath. Eliza was such a sweet little girl, and since I'm a guy and she came from a family of mostly guys, she took an immediate liking to me. She'd spend so much time sitting on me, eating her food, and then when she was done, she'd be sure to clean up after herself and groom the both of us. A couple of days later, in the early morning, as the sun was rising, Eliza was moved to her new intermediary home, an intro enclosure attached to D&D Troop. This is where she would meet her first potential foster moms and her new foster family. Hannah brought Eliza over, and Nellie let Eliza out of her sleep crate. Eliza immediately ran right over to me. She was super excited to see me and totally nervous and confused by the other monkeys.
What, are you gonna groom me now? You nervous? Look at all of them. They just want to meet you. Yeah, there they are. Your whole new family.
After a long time of sitting on me, gaining her confidence, talking like crazy, and cautiously observing the troop monkeys, she finally began to explore her new enclosure.
What?
Timmy and his mom Precious hung out by the gate for a while, inspecting Eliza.
Did you see that?
Although Eliza was very nervous of the other monkeys, she was nervous in a way that made her aggressively defensive. You'll see in this next clip, pay attention to the way that she reacts to the monkey at the fence. She sees the monkey, she gets nervous and jumps back, but then she reacts by lunging forward at the monkey, which is actually a sign of aggression. It's threatening them. It's common in Vervet culture to lunge forward and say like, hey, back off, this is my area. And that is not the type of behavior that you want to see from a young monkey who's trying to be integrated into a troop, especially a monkey that is very young, has no social standing, no one to protect them. It's not the best. Now, hopefully it's just because she was trying to defend myself and Nellie because she's more comfortable around humans than she is with monkeys, but it's really hard to say. As Eliza calmed down and got more comfortable, she actually had a really nice interaction with Phyllis. After a few days, the humans left the enclosure, and the mother monkeys and juveniles were allowed inside the enclosure to meet Eliza. But as with most humanized monkeys, Eliza was not happy about this situation and ran around the enclosure screaming.
Yes, sir, everyone will come inside of this cage. She's a good lady. Go on, eat mom. Eat the food.
Typical Vervet.
Over the next couple of weeks, Nellie let in a wide variety of females and juveniles, trying so many different monkeys in the troop to see if one would fit well with Eliza, but she just was not interested in any of them. In fact, she was quite scared of most of the monkeys. And she got groomed a couple of times, but it was more like she got pinned to the ground, groomed, and then the moment she got let up, she took off and ran to a corner. And if she did get cornered by a monkey, she would lash out kind of aggressively, which would piss off the other monkeys and cause them to not want anything to do with her or to become aggressive toward her. So it was really a rough time for Eliza. This went on and on and on, and Eliza developed a pretty intense habit of pacing inside of the enclosure, which is a terrible sign. And we all sort of started to wonder if this little monkey was just going to be doomed to a life of living inside of an intro enclosure because she didn't want to get along with other monkeys. And you know, it would take us years to finally find another monkey to possibly integrate in with her, and that we just couldn't stand to see that happen. That idea, the notion of Eliza spending her life like that was just heartbreaking. So the decision was made to try her with another troop. The troop that we decided to try her with was James' troop, because James' troop is a much smaller troop, and it's made up of mostly females and a lot of juveniles. So hopefully, by introducing Eliza to a smaller, calmer troop, she would get along nicer and be happier and make friends faster. On a hot, sunny day, Nellie and Tori packed up Eliza into a little travel crate and brought her down to James' troop, where Yuval was waiting to take over the integration process. When Tori went into the intro enclosure to grab Eliza, she immediately ran into Tori's arms, which is not something that you want to see with a baby who's already been in an intro enclosure for about a month.
Go.
Of course, Eliza was pretty confused at first in her new enclosure, and she just climbed the fence and called out to us because she wanted to be back with people.
Same end result. Alright, shall we?
James Troop sat by the fence, curiously observing the new monkey, but Eliza still wanted nothing to do with them.
How old's the youngest juvenile?
We have 2 from last year.
The first 2 monkeys to enter the enclosure were an adult female named Lychee, who's been a great foster mom in the past, and a young juvenile who is a past orphan named Neville.
It also sticks out at weird angles.
Immediately, we could see that Eliza's entire demeanor had changed. It was incredible. You know, she wasn't really interested in Lychee. She still was kind of nervous about the moms and the older monkeys, but she went right over to Neville and sat beside him on a branch, and he actually moved away from her.
Wow. That was huge.
God.
Crazy! It's like she's a different monkey in here.
Just the simple act of approaching another monkey and sitting next to them really shows that you're comfortable with them or that you want to be friends with them because you're approaching them. So for Eliza to go up to Neville and just sit next to him, that was huge. And that got us all so excited because, you know, we saw in that moment, like, okay, you know what? This might work out. I think that she's going to be able to go into James Troop. Based on Lychee's past experience as a foster mom and just her overall demeanor, she was chosen to be the female to stay in the enclosure with Eliza.
I love it. Sometimes you see what the females, like the baby would be drinking, and the females would just, because they can't fit inside, they would just reach and grab their tails and pull them out.
And even on her own, Eliza was having way more fun than she ever had in the D&D intro enclosure. The relationship between Lychee and Eliza wasn't as tight-knit as some females are with their adoptive babies, but Eliza was getting along with Lychee. They'd groom each other sometimes, they'd eat together, they'd sit together, and she was actually making friends with a lot of the other juveniles as well. She really got close with this female from the 2015-2016 baby season named Aisha. Here's Aisha grooming Eliza on top of the feeding cage.
Oh, and Aroha mounted her and kind of humped her a bit, which is not so nice to see. It's not actually broken, it's always been.
After about a month of Eliza getting to know the troop inside of the intro enclosure, it was finally time for her to head out into the main enclosure. We're about to do the release of Eliza with Lychee into the James Troop enclosure. There's Eliza, looking very eager to be with people. There's Lychee doing her typical thing. Here's the James Troop enclosure. It's one of the smaller enclosures here. There's not many monkeys in there. I think there's like 10 or something, maybe less. Boom. Yeah, you always grab that stuff, don't you? Chances are, this is not going to go well. I hope I'm wrong, but I think that Eliza's probably going to try and climb the fence, and she's probably not going to want to go out clinging to Lychee's belly, and it's going to be a rough morning. But I've been wrong many times in my life, and I really hope I'm wrong this time. The moment that door was opened, Lychee walked right outside and didn't even look back to see if Eliza was following her. Eliza made her first go for the door, but she got scared and ran right back inside. Then she mustered her confidence and wandered out. She hung close to the door, making sure it would stay open. Then she mustered her confidence and she wandered out the door. She went a little bit down the fence, she came back to the door, she went further down the fence, she came back to the door, she went further down the fence, climbed up on the feeding cage, and climbed right up over the electric fence and out of the enclosure.
What?
One of our integration staff members named Nico was sitting by with a couple of girls watching the process, and Eliza saw him right after she climbed out of the enclosure and recognized him as a man and just ran right into his arms.
That's the problem with this. It's like some of them are really strong and some are not. You did get that.
Nico carried Eliza back into the intro enclosure, and Lychee made sure to express her displeasure with all of us.
She climbed the fence.
Eliza then gave Lychee a very thorough butt grooming. For days on end, this is how things went. Eliza would venture out the door, hang close to the fence, and then some other monkey would come by. Eliza would get scared, and she'd run right back inside the enclosure. The good news, though, was that every time she would go out, she'd venture a little further along the fence. She'd get further and further from the intro enclosure. She even drank from inside one of the feeding cages. With little nervous Eliza, it was just about patience. And after a couple of days, she was actually venturing away from the fence and going up into the trees that were closest to the intro enclosure. She still hadn't explored further or deeper into the enclosure, but she was getting there, and she was even playing with the juveniles inside and outside of her intro enclosure.
That was a little too intense for her.
After several more days, the big night finally came. It was time for Eliza to spend the night with the rest of James' troop in the trees of the main enclosure.
Shit. Go find your mama.
Eliza was confused why the gate wouldn't open. She paced by the fence for a while, but she never tried to climb it. Then Eliza spotted Lychee hanging out in a tree, and Eliza climbed up to join her.
Get this one out fast. Oh, that'll happen soon. Give it a week or two.
Lychee groomed Eliza and calmed the little monkey. And then Eliza began to explore deeper into the enclosure than she ever had before. You could tell that Eliza was pretty unsure about the whole situation, but she kept her composure. Tori and Yuval kept an eye on Eliza until it was too dark to see her anymore, and they were positive that she was up in the trees, snuggled in with the other monkeys, safe and ready for sleep. The next morning, Eliza was doing great. She had successfully spent her first night out in the trees. Eliza has now been out in the troop for about a month, and every time you approach the fence, she actually runs away to be with other monkeys. If you didn't know her story, you would never know that she was once this traumatized ex-pet who wanted nothing to do with monkeys and only wanted to be around people. And to see her now flourishing in the troop and wanting nothing to do with people is the most rewarding feeling in the world.